Everyone laughed when the famous singer pointed at the janitor and said, "You sing now!" No one expected what happened next. The grand concert hall was buzzing with excitement. Crystal Blake, a world-famous singer with millions of fans, was rehearsing for her sold-out show. Her voice was known everywhere, powerful, perfect, untouchable. But during rehearsal, something irritated her. A soft humming echoed through the hall. It wasn't loud, but it was beautiful. She turned sharply. "Who is making that noise?" she snapped. All eyes turned to the man holding a mop near the back of the stage. His name was Ethan, the night janitor. He froze instantly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to—" Crystal smirked. "Oh, you like singing?" The crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ethan kept his head down. "Well," Crystal said loudly, "since you think you can sing in my hall, why don't you come up here and sing solo?" Laughter filled the room. Ethan's hands shook as he stepped forward, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. Ethan had never stood on a stage before. Not like this. Not under bright lights. Not surrounded by people who were already judging him before he even opened his mouth. Music had always been his secret. Years ago, when life was kinder, Ethan dreamed of becoming a singer. His mother used to sit on the couch and listen as he sang old songs late at night. She always told him his voice was special, but dreams don't always survive reality. His mother passed away. His father fell ill. Bills piled up. College plans disappeared. Ethan took any job he could find just to keep going. Singing slowly became something he only did when no one was around. Empty rooms, quiet hallways, and late nights with only echoes to listen. Crystal didn't know any of that. To her, Ethan was just a janitor who had crossed a line. "Don't be nervous," she mocked. "This should be fun." Someone in the crew whispered, "This isn't right." But Crystal waved them off. "Relax, it's just a joke." The pianist sighed and rested his fingers on the keys. "Key of C," Crystal said carelessly. "Let's hear him embarrass himself." Ethan swallowed hard. His heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct told him to run. But something deeper, something buried for years, told him to stay. He closed his eyes, and then he sang. The first note floated through the hall like a whisper, soft, honest, real. The laughter died instantly. Ethan's voice wasn't loud, but it carried emotion. The kind you couldn't fake. It filled the space between the seats, climbed the walls, and settled into every corner of the room. People stopped moving. Phones slowly lowered. Crystal's smile faded. Ethan sang like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to release. His voice rose higher, smoother, stronger, hitting notes Crystal herself struggled to reach during intense training sessions. The pianist stared at him in disbelief, fingers trembling as he followed along. By the final note, the room was completely silent. No clapping, no whispers, just shock. Ethan opened his eyes, suddenly afraid he had done something wrong. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'll go back to work." Then someone clapped. Once, twice. And suddenly the entire hall erupted in applause. Crew members stood up. Some had tears in their eyes. Crystal stood frozen, her face pale. For the first time in her career, she felt something unfamiliar. Fear. "That was unexpected," Crystal said, forcing a laugh. "Beginner's luck." But no one laughed with her. The producer stepped forward. "Where did you train?" he asked Ethan. "I didn't," Ethan replied honestly. "I just sing." Crystal turned away, embarrassed and angry. Later that night, someone uploaded a short clip of Ethan's performance online. By morning, it had millions of views. Comments flooded in. "Why is this man a janitor? That voice gave me chills. Real talent doesn't need fame." Crystal's fans began asking questions. Sponsors noticed her behavior. Interviews brought uncomfortable topics. Meanwhile, Ethan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Record labels, talent agents, vocal coaches. But Ethan didn't feel proud. He felt overwhelmed. "I never wanted to take anyone's place," he said in an interview. "I just wanted to sing." Weeks later, Crystal requested a private meeting. She expected anger, bitterness, revenge. Instead, Ethan smiled. "You embarrassed me," Crystal admitted quietly. But you also reminded me why I started singing in the first place. Ethan nodded. Sometimes people forget where they came from. Crystal looked down. I did. Months later, Ethan returned to the same concert hall. Not with a mop, but with a microphone. This time, the seats were full. When he sang, the audience rose to their feet, tears streaming down their faces. Not because he was famous, but because he was real. And somewhere backstage, Crystal watched silently, finally understanding one powerful truth. Talent doesn't wear uniforms, and the most powerful voices are often the ones no one bothered to hear. Ethan didn't always push a mop. Once, years ago, he dreamed of becoming a singer. Music was his escape, his soul. His voice came from pain, love, and loss. But life wasn't kind. His mother passed away after a long illness, leaving behind silence that hurt more than words. His father followed soon after, weakened by grief and disease. College dreams faded into hospital bills. Scholarships didn't matter anymore. Survival did. Ethan gave up everything to stay afloat. Singing became something he only did when no one was listening. Late at night, cleaning empty halls, humming softly between sweeping floors and wiping empty seats. Music became his secret language with the past. Crystal had no idea. To her, Ethan was just a janitor who forgot his place. Don't be shy, she mocked. Show us what you've got. Someone near the soundboard whispered, this is cruel. But Crystal didn't care. She believed talent belonged only to people like her, trained, famous, applauded. Not someone who cleaned the floors beneath her feet. Ethan stood center stage under blinding lights, surrounded by judgmental eyes. The heat from the lamps made his palms sweat. His heart raced so loudly he wondered if everyone could hear it. His voice trembled as he spoke. I haven't sung in front of people, ever. Crystal rolled her eyes. Then this should be entertaining. The pianist sighed and placed his fingers on the keys. And then the music began. The opening chords were soft, almost gentle, like a question waiting for an answer. Ethan closed his eyes. For a brief moment, the room disappeared. He wasn't in a concert hall anymore. He was back in his childhood bedroom, singing quietly so his parents could hear him from the kitchen. He remembered his mother smiling. He remembered feeling safe. He took a deep breath, and he sang. The first note left his lips carefully, as if afraid of being rejected. It floated through the air, warm, raw, and honest. The laughter stopped. A few crew members straightened in their seats. Someone near the stage frowned, confused by the sudden shift in energy. Ethan continued. His voice grew stronger with every word, steadying itself like a wounded thing finding balance again. Each note carried years of buried emotion, loss, struggle, hope that refused to die. Crystal's smirk slowly faded. This wasn't noise. This wasn't luck. This was something real. Ethan reached a higher note, one that echoed across the empty seats and climbed toward the ceiling. It was clean, controlled, effortless, the kind of note singers spent years trying to master. The pianist froze for half a second, stunned, before instinctively following Ethan's lead. His hands moved faster now, drawn into the emotion of the moment. People exchanged looks. Is this actually happening? Ethan wasn't performing. With every line, his voice grew fuller, deeper, more confident. The pain in his chest turned into strength. His fear dissolved into purpose. By the time he reached the final chorus, the hall felt different, heavier, quieter, alive. Crystal stood motionless. She had sung that song hundreds of times, but never like this. Ethan hit the final note and held it, letting it ring until the silence swallowed it completely. Then he stopped. The sound faded. The hall went completely still. No claps, no laughter, no whispers. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, suddenly unsure of himself. His chest rose and fell as reality returned. I'm sorry, he said softly. I didn't mean to waste anyone's time. I'll go back to work now. He turned to leave. That's when someone clapped, once sharp and loud. Everyone turned. Then another clap followed, and another. Within seconds, the entire hall exploded with applause. Crew members stood to their feet. Some stared at Ethan like they'd just witnessed something impossible. Others wiped tears from their eyes. The pianist shook his head in disbelief. Where have you been hiding that voice? He muttered. Ethan froze, unsure how to react. Crystal tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. Well, she said, forcing confidence, that was unexpected. But her words didn't convince anyone. The producer stepped forward, eyes locked on Ethan. Who trained you? He asked. No one, Ethan replied honestly. I just sing when I'm alone. The producer smiled slowly. You shouldn't be alone anymore. Crystal looked away. For the first time in years, she felt something crack inside her. Not her voice, but her pride. That night, someone uploaded a short clip of Ethan singing to social media. By morning, it had gone viral. Millions watched the janitor with the voice of a lifetime. And the world began asking the same question. How many talents have we ignored? Just because they didn't look important? Ethan closed his eyes. For a moment, the world disappeared. Then he sang. One note. Pure, deep, emotional. The laughter stopped instantly. The sound filled the hall, not loud, but powerful. It carried pain, hope, and honesty. Every word felt real. Crew members froze. Phones slowly lowered. Crystal's smile vanished. Ethan's voice climbed higher, effortlessly. Notes so clean, so controlled, they sent chills through the room. Notes Crystal herself struggled to reach on her best days. The pianist stared at him in disbelief. Ethan wasn't showing off. He was feeling the music. By the final note, the room was completely silent. No laughter. No whispers. Only shock. Ethan opened his eyes, breathing heavily. I'm sorry, he said softly. I'll go back to work. But no one moved. Then someone began to clap. One clap turned into thunderous applause. Crystal stood frozen. Her ego shattered in seconds. The applause grew louder, echoing off the walls of the empty hall like a storm that refused to stop. Crew members stood up from their chairs. Some looked at Ethan like they had just witnessed something impossible. Ethan didn't know where to look. He had never been applauded before. Not for his voice, not like this. He felt his throat tighten as emotions he had buried for years came rushing back. He lowered his head, gripping the microphone stand like it was the only thing keeping him steady. The pianist broke the silence first. That wasn't luck, he said quietly. That was talent. Crystal forced a laugh, but it cracked halfway through. All right, let's not get carried away, she said. He hit a few notes. No one agreed. The producer stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on Ethan. What's your name? He asked. Ethan, he replied. And how long have you been singing? Ethan hesitated. My whole life. Just not out loud. A murmur spread through the room. Crystal turned away, her jaw clenched. For years, she had trained endlessly to protect her position, and now someone with no lessons, no fame, no platform had just done what she couldn't. He made people feel something. That scared her. Ethan handed the microphone back gently. I should get back to work, he said again. But this time, the producer stopped him. No, he said firmly. You shouldn't. Later that night, after the hall emptied, Ethan returned to cleaning. The mop felt heavier than usual. His mind replayed every second of what had happened, convincing himself it wasn't real. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Mark, the producer from rehearsal. We need to talk. Before Ethan could respond, another message came in. Then another. By the time he reached the exit, his phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Someone had recorded his performance. The clip had been posted online, and it was spreading fast. By morning, the video had millions of views. People around the world watched a janitor step into the spotlight and steal, it with nothing but his voice. Comments flooded in. This gave me chills. Why isn't he famous already? That emotion. You can't teach that. Crystal Blake looked terrified. Ethan sat on his small couch staring at the screen in disbelief. For the first time in his life, the world was listening. Meanwhile, Crystal's phone was lighting up too, but not with praise. Fans questioned her behavior. Clips slowed down her reaction. Headlines began to form. Famous singer mocks janitor, regrets it instantly. Sponsors called. Interviews were canceled. And Crystal felt something she hadn't felt in years. Small. A week later, Ethan was invited back to the same hall. This time, he didn't carry a mop. He stood on the stage again, hands shaking, heart pounding, but not from fear. From hope. Producers offered him opportunities. Vocal coaches offered help. Record labels offered contracts. Ethan listened quietly. "I don't want fame for revenge," he said honestly. "I just want to sing." That answer sealed it. Months passed. The same concert hall filled with people again. But this time, they weren't there for Crystal Blake. They were there for Ethan. When he walked on stage, the crowd erupted, not because of hype, but because they remembered that first note. The one that came from nowhere and changed everything. Ethan closed his eyes once more and sang. Not as a janitor, not as a joke, but as an artist. Backstage, Crystal watched silently. She didn't clap. She didn't smile. She just listened, and finally understood the truth she had forgotten long ago. Talent doesn't come from status. It comes from soul. And the quietest people often carry the loudest gifts. Crystal forced a laugh. "Beginner's luck," she said. But her voice lacked confidence. The truth was clear. Ethan had something she couldn't buy, train, or fake. The producer stepped forward. "Who trained you?" he asked Ethan. "No one," Ethan replied. "I just sing." Crystal clenched her fists. For the first time in her career, she felt threatened. Later that evening, a video of Ethan singing leaked online. Millions watched in disbelief. The clip was less than a minute long, filmed shakily from the back of the hall. But it didn't matter. The emotion in Ethan's voice broke through the screen. People replayed it again and again. Comments exploded. "Why is he a janitor? And that voice is unreal." Crystal Blake could never. By morning, the video had crossed 10 million views. News outlets picked it up. Reaction videos flooded social media. Musicians analyzed his technique, shocked by his natural control and emotional depth. And with every share, Crystal's image cracked a little more. Fans questioned her behavior. Old interviews resurfaced. Sponsors quietly pulled back, not wanting to be associated with arrogance. Crystal sat alone in her dressing room, staring at her phone. She had spent years protecting her reputation, and it took one voice to undo it. Meanwhile, Ethan's life changed overnight. His phone rang nonstop. Messages from unknown numbers filled his inbox. Record labels called. Vocal coaches begged to work with him. Talent agents promised stages he had only ever cleaned. But Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't even smile. He sat in his small apartment, holding his phone like it might disappear. "I never wanted to embarrass anyone," he said quietly in his first interview. "I just wanted to sing." That humility made people love him even more. A few days later, the producer invited Ethan back to the concert hall. This time, the doors were open. Executives sat in the front row. Musicians filled the sides. Everyone wanted to hear him again, without the mockery, without the pressure. Ethan stood on the same stage where he had once been laughed at. Only now the room was silent in respect. "Sing whatever you want," the producer said. Ethan nodded. He closed his eyes and sang. His voice flowed freely, no fear holding it back. Every note was intentional, honest, alive. By the final chord, the decision was already made. The producer stood. "You don't need training," he said. "You need a platform." Contracts were offered. Deals discussed. But Ethan surprised everyone. "I want time," he said. "I want to do this right." They agreed. Across town, Crystal watched the live stream of Ethan's performance. She turned off the screen halfway through. Not out of anger, but regret. She remembered her early days, singing in small rooms, dreaming big, promising herself she'd never forget where she came from. Somewhere along the way, she had. Weeks later, Crystal requested a private meeting. Ethan hesitated but agreed. They met in a quiet room, far from cameras. "I was wrong," Crystal said, her voice low. "I mocked you because I was afraid." Ethan listened. "You reminded me of something I lost," she continued. "The love of singing." Ethan nodded slowly. "Talent doesn't belong to anyone," he said. "It's just borrowed." Crystal swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "I forgive you." Months passed. Ethan released his first live performance online. No flashy edits, no auto-tune, just his voice. It went viral instantly. Fans lined up outside small venues just to hear him sing. Critics praised his authenticity. People said his voice made them feel seen. And when asked about his past, Ethan always answered the same way. I cleaned floors. Now I clean hearts. 1 year later, the same concert hall filled again. This time, every seat was sold. Ethan walked onto the stage, lights shining down on him. The applause lasted minutes. In the audience, Crystal sat quietly. She clapped. Not for fame, but for truth. Ethan took the microphone and spoke. I learned something here, he said. Never judge a voice before you hear it. Then he sang, and the world listened. Weeks later, Crystal requested a private meeting. She expected anger. Instead, Ethan smiled. I forgive you, he said. You reminded me of who I really am. Crystal's eyes filled with tears. She had fame, money, awards, but Ethan had something she lost long ago: humility. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't feel awkward but heavy with meaning. Crystal looked down at her hands that had once trembled with excitement before every performance. I don't recognize myself anymore, she admitted. I built my career chasing perfection, and somewhere along the way I forgot why I started singing. Ethan listened without judgment. I sang because it was the only place I felt honest, he said quietly. When life took everything else from me, music stayed. Crystal nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I mocked you because I was afraid, she confessed. Afraid that real talent could exist without everything I worked for? Ethan smiled gently. Talent doesn't belong to anyone, he said. It just finds a voice. That was the moment Crystal realized something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Months later, posters appeared across the city. Not with flashy graphics or exaggerated promises. Just a simple message. Ethan, live. The same concert hall. The same stage. But a very different story. The night of the performance, the hall was packed. Every seat filled. People stood in the aisles. Some held signs. Others held their breath. Backstage, Ethan stood quietly, eyes closed, grounding himself. No mop, no uniform, just a microphone. He remembered the first time he stood there. Mocked, trembling, invisible. He remembered thinking his voice didn't matter. Now thousands were waiting to hear it. The lights dimmed. The crowd erupted. Ethan stepped onto the stage. The applause didn't stop. He waited patiently, hand raised, not rushing the moment. When the room finally settled, he spoke. I used to clean this stage, he said softly. I never imagined I'd stand on it. The audience grew quiet. But music has a strange way of finding its way out, he continued, even when we try to hide it. Then he sang. The first note wrapped around the audience like a memory. The second reached deeper. His voice carried everything he had lived through. Grief, survival, hope, forgiveness. People cried openly, not because he was famous, but because they felt understood. Each song felt personal, like he was singing for them, not at them. By the final note, the crowd stood in silence, stunned, before erupting into a standing ovation. Tears streamed down faces. Strangers hugged. Music had done what it always does best. It connected people. Backstage, Crystal watched from the shadows. No cameras. No spotlight. Just her. She listened with her hand over her mouth, tears falling freely. She realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. Ethan hadn't taken anything from her. He had reminded her of something she had lost. After the show, Crystal waited. When Ethan came off stage, she clapped. Thank you, she said. For what? Ethan asked. For showing me that music doesn't need to be perfect, she replied. It just needs to be real. In the months that followed, Ethan's career grew, but slowly on his own terms. He refused shortcuts. He sang in small venues, schools, community halls. He visited hospitals and shelters, performing for people who never had tickets to big shows. When asked why, he always answered the same way. Those are the rooms that taught me to sing. Critics praised his authenticity. Fans respected his humility. He never forgot where he came from. Crystal, too, changed. She canceled a world tour and returned to writing music alone. No pressure, no expectations. She sang quietly again, just for herself. In interviews, she spoke honestly about that night. I learned that talent isn't loud, she said. Sometimes it's sweeping floors, waiting to be heard. 1 year later, Ethan returned to the concert hall for a special performance. This time, Crystal joined him on stage. Not as a star, But as a singer, they sang together, not to compete but to connect. The audience didn't cheer louder for one than the other. They cheered for the moment. As the lights faded and the applause filled the hall, one truth remained clear. Talent doesn't wear uniforms. Greatness doesn't announce itself. And the most powerful voices often rise from silence when someone finally chooses to listen.